Hello everyone and welcome to the Distinct Mastering YouTube channel. My name is Freddie. Today we're going to be talking about an interesting topic, how to get your vocals to sit good in your mix. So let's get right into it. Okay, just to kind of preface a little bit before we get into my session, I have this track that I made a couple months ago. It's a cool track. It's going to be coming out next year on NOS Recordings, so stay tuned for that. If you're unsure what NOS Recordings is, you can catch the links down below. It is my record label and my alias Fresco Bar, and we have a lot of cool things coming up, so please do check it out. Regarding this track, I used some samples I found either on Splice or Loopcloud, and a lot of the times, you know, there's wet samples and dry samples, but in this instance, I couldn't find the dry version. They only had wet versions, so I have to work with those. And I'm gonna show you how to get your vocals to sit well in your mix, and also just a couple tips on using wet vocals. In this instance, obviously with dry vocals, you have free reign to do what you want. And this one was a unique case, so I thought it'd be cool to do a video on this. So let's get right into my session and check it out. Okay, here we are. This is the session, and on the left is the extended mix, and on the right is the radio mix. If you're unsure about how I do my radio versions, I did make a video on this quite some time ago. You can check the links in the description, and I'll leave you a link to that so you can go back and see what I do with these shortened versions for Spotify and streaming services. But in a nutshell, this is the track, and I will go ahead and play you a little bit of this. So here's a little preview. Okay, getting into the vocal bus, this is all of the vocals, and there's a lot of slicing, a lot of chops going on. We've got this track, which is just a looped vocal, and then we have the main vocals here, and then I have a little pieces here, and then I also have this piece right here. So if I turn on the automation, you're gonna see a lot more stuff. Just opening this up, there's a lot going on here. This isn't really related to what we're talking about today, but I will dabble in it. So first of all, step one, when you're trying to get your vocals to sit right in your mix, first you need to do some cleanup. I just went through this with a friend of mine who was here at the studio and shared how some of the vocals that he was using were still very dirty. And if you missed my video last week on how to prepare your vocals if you are recording vocals, I did do a video on that, so I'll leave you a link down below so you can check that out as well. The same will apply to any sampled vocals, and I want to show you that in this instance, like I mentioned in the beginning of the video, there was no dry version of this vocal on whatever app I used. I don't remember exactly. So I'm going to solo the vocal for you so you can hear what it sounds like. And I've got everything off. Just mind you, all of the effects are off. I've turned off all of my return tracks. So this is just the vocal all by itself. And you can hear that it's wet, like I said, and it's got this really high-end information that is just really hurting my ears. So before we get into actually cleaning up and getting the vocals to sit right in the mix, one of the most important things you have to pay attention to is volume. And gain staging is super important. One of the things that I like to do is set up a K-metering system. I have a video on that too. I'll leave you a link down below. And as you can see here, if you look at all these clips, I have the gain turned down -10. The reason why I do that is to give myself headroom to work later. A lot of these samples come in really hot, and I want to turn them down before I actually begin my work, and to bring them down to the level of what I'm actually working with in my session. One of the first things I would typically do is put a de-esser to combat any sibilance. But in this instance, I didn't follow that formula. I actually went for an EQ. And looking at the EQ, what I did is I have three areas. I have a shelf here at 16,784 hertz, -10.75. I have a bell dip here at 6,331 hertz, almost 4 dB. And then I have a boost here, which we'll get into. So let me just go ahead and play this for you off again. I don't care about nobody. But I'm going to turn this on. Now you might think that that sounds a little bit dull, and in context with the mix, it actually works. Why? Well, let me play it for you in context with the mix. First off, and then on. As you can see, by taking out all this high end, it's leaving room for all that top end, all that percussion. And what I want to do is I want to show you this one by one, how I went about this. So first I started with this dip, and what it's doing, it's just taking away this mess. It's just a bunch of harshness that I don't need in my mix. Then I went for this. This is pretty drastic, but it was, in my opinion, necessary because it just took away all that top end I don't need. And even with these two, it sounds much better. But now, by taking away some of the energy from the top, I'm able to shift some of that energy into the mid-range and get that vocal, give it its own space. And so that's where this mid-range boost came in. And so that, you see, is how I started by cleaning my vocals. First, I went for adjusting my clips, putting any fades necessary. Then what I did is I went for the EQ. Lastly, part of the cleaning phase was my de-esser here. And so what I'm doing here is I'm using the female wideband preset and adjusted it to where I needed it. Doesn't even look like it's really working much, but it is doing something. You know, what's funny is I wonder, I don't remember, I could have had this first, but it actually isn't even really doing much because this is taking care of all the work. But let's mute this. Yeah, see, it's working now. So it's catching some things. So this likely would have still been better in the beginning. And that is why it's important to think about your signal flow and the order of your plugins. And this was great that I ran into this because I just remembered I do have a video on how I order plugins, but it's never fixed and it does change from time to time. And you kind of have to go with what's needed. But if you're interested in checking that video out, I'll leave you a link down below. Now, the other thing that you see here is just a filtering plugin, and what's happening with this is just some basic filtering right here. So as you can see all of that down there. We can turn this one off. There's a lot of filtering going on that's kind of enhancing the elements of the vocals, so it's kind of giving change over time and helping it to evolve just to keep you interested, as you see here. And then there's some effects and the output automation of volume, which, you know, a lot of people would reach for a compressor. And I did use a compressor. I did use 2 compressors on the bus, but I also automated my volume and to try to even things out going into the compressor. So that does lead me to my next area. After you've thought about your cleanup and your frequency spectrum cleanup, you know, think about your dynamics and how the shape of the characteristic of the vocal should be working with the rest of your track. I'm going to strictly focus on these 2 tracks, maybe this third one, because, you know, these are essentially the lead vocal lines. I just have them split across 3 tracks. And we're going to solo these. So you hear it coming in. And so now you can see how I chopped it up. And yeah, so then I abruptly have a little cutoff there. But like I said, some of this is going to be taken care of later with my return track, so I'll show you that. You might be wondering why I didn't clean that out. And I use that as part of my effect, actually. So let's get into the compression. I want to show you what I did next. So then what I did was I'm going to go ahead and go back to a good section to kind of loop up and show you guys what happened next. So then I went for an 1176. Very common hardware compressor. This is the UAD plugin recreation. If you are curious to know more about this, I have a video on the 1176. I'll leave you a link in the description. But basically what we've got is we've got a fast release and a fast attack. So this is just kind of catching the peaks. You can see it moving quickly there. The ratio is 12:1, but I have the input pretty low. So it's only hitting about -3 dB on the meter, but it's just catching those peaks rather quickly. The attack is a little slower than the release. And you might be wondering, well, what are you talking about? All the way to the right is slower, but if you know the 1176, it's actually opposite. All the way to the right, clockwise, is going to be fast, and counterclockwise, all the way to the left, is going to be slow. So keep that in mind when using an 1176. Now, what you see is I've basically matched the output. Let me play that again. That's off. Here's with it on. And you see how I turn it off, you can see that the level has been matched. So even though there's a little bit of compression, the overall output coming out of the unit is exactly the same as it was coming in. Very important to gain stage your stuff. I have a video on that too. Leave you a link down below. Next up for the compression is a leveling amplifier, the one and only LA2A. One of my favorites. Love this thing. And as you see, it's barely tapping that meter. It's a little about 1.5 dB of leveling. So first I hit it with the 1176 with a quick attack, quick release, just to catch those peaks, kind of a 2-stage compression. I have a great video on multi-stage compression too, another link down below for you. Lots of learning out of this, but it's just touching on a lot of the same principles of things I've talked about in prior videos. Hitting almost 2 dB. But look again, turning it off and on, you see that it's level matched once again. And then, you know, I didn't do a whole lot. I didn't add saturation. All I did was actually add a wider plugin. If you look here, I thought the vocals were doing well at this point. And I'll turn on my filtering. I have more filtering on this track. So this plugin is a free plugin by Polyverse and Infected Mushroom. I made a video on this quite some time ago. Link down below for you to check that one out too. It's a great plugin to get things a little wide. I don't always like to use it because it does play with the phase characteristics, and I'm not always the biggest fan of wider plugins, but this one's a pretty good one. And sometimes I'll use mid-side, sometimes I'll use wider plugins. So let's try it off. So all that did is kind of bring the vocals a little bit more to the sides. It still collapses well in mono. I did check it in mono, so no worries there. And that gives it a little bit of space in the middle for the bass and the kick, and just kind of puts the vocal in its own place in the stage. And then you're probably wondering, okay, well, now I've gave it its place, but now I want it to be melted into the track. Typically at this stage, I would be looking at effects. I'm gonna go ahead and turn on all these return tracks now. There's a lot going on here. Now, these are not all for the vocals. I just wanna let you know I just muted them all just to be quick for the video. But I think the reason why I went for the delay is because there was already reverb on her vocals a little bit, and mostly you could hear the delays. And if you pay attention, what I ended up doing is, if you take this fade away, oh wait, let me turn that loop off. And I'll solo this for you. So I basically matched the delay to basically give myself the rest of the tail that is missing, because if I pull this out, I get back to that same vocal. So I added some more of my own delays. It looks like what I did was, let's see. So this one is just the quarter note. This is the one that's being matched. And this one is just a simple waves H delay that's always in my template. Love this thing. Bring that over here for you so you can see the settings. After putting on the quarter note delay, all I basically did was put a little reverb, and it does look like I used reverb on this. I use this EMT 140 plate. Let's mute this. So you can hear that it just... That just helps it blend into the mix a little bit more. Let me turn it off once again. So with the vocal now, it's kind of on top of the mix, and that's partly because of the wider plugin, partly because of that 2K shelf boost. Turning this on, all this does is kind of melt it right back into the track. Gives it a sense of space. And it's just helping it just sit right into that mix. And so all I did from there, on the bus, I have this Echo Boy send here, which is just sending 13 to this Echo Boy right here. And that is all the vocals. So this is an old preset that I saved from one of my songs from many, many years ago on Enormous Tunes with Lavelle Dupree and Rebecca Jade, called the Beat Drop. And I use this preset quite often. It's something that I created. So on top of all the other delays, I have a delay on the bus. And that's subtle. Let me solo it. So you hear the quarter note by itself matching their quarter note delay, and then when you bring in my eighth note Echo Boy, it's just on top of the quarters. And that is how I'm getting that feeling right delay. And so this is how I melted these vocals into my track and got them to sit in my mix. You know, there's no right or wrong way to do things, but there's good practices that you should follow. So now that we got to the very end of this whole thing, I want to show you kind of what this sounds like. I want to go back to the volume topic because, you know, I moved up the volume of these main vocals and I want to bring them back down to where they were. And I'm going to go ahead and play you what this track sounds like. And now you can see that the vocals are sitting right in the mix because I turned them up to the video. And you can hear the filters working right there, giving some dynamics. Now, mind you, this is not the mastered version. This is actually just the original mix. And then you can hear some of those delays, and you hear how everything is nice and tight in the mix. Here comes some more vocals. And you can see the depth of the effects that I have there. So kind of going over the steps one more time. First, clean up your clips or your tracks. Second, clean up your frequencies with your EQs and your de-essers. Get things sitting right in your mix frequency-wise. Third, consider dynamics. You don't always need to use compression. If the vocals don't need a compressor, I wouldn't put one on. You could just do more damage than good. But if your vocals are dynamic and you need to sit them better in the mix, you may consider using a compressor or two for multi-stage compression. After that, you want to take a look at some of your effects and getting things to be melted into your track so they sit nice and they sound like they are part of the song. I hope this video helps you out. If you found it useful, please hit the like button, subscribe to my channel, and the bell notification will keep you up to date. And if you want to go back and learn how to clean your vocals before you get to this stage, make sure you check out that video. I'll leave you a link right now, and I will catch you on the next one. Peace.